Greater London is a city of about 8 million people, covering over 600 square miles, whereas the City of London is only just over 1 square mile in the heart of that. But it is the historic core of London. The Romans built a settlement where the City of London now stands, and indeed the first London Bridge. From that early beginning, it has always been a centre of trade. The City of London is a very unusual area. We have only 10,000 residents, but over 330,000 people who come to work in the city every day. Over the last quarter century, the City of London has probably been transformed to as great a degree as was the case after the Fire of London.
Well, the city has been there for 2,000 years. It's never lost the Roman street plan, but it's had accreted other layers of street plans. It has a medieval series of plans overlaid on it, and then the Georgian and the Victorian network. And now it's got the scale of the 20th century, which is like nothing else, and yet it's squeezed into that medieval plan. So its form is generated in a very different way to other cities.
I hope that the city maintains the continuity that is there in terms of its medieval and even Roman fabric. The streets and spaces, the passages, the small squares. Our contribution is very much one to do with continuity, but in reinterpretation in the present. We are a practice of about 60 people, 17 nationalities. It's developed through a dialogue and a discourse about the city. There isn't a style tag. There's much more a concern for a way of crafting the materiality of these projects, but also their relationship to a specific urban site, whether it's a street, a square, or an urban place of an atypical kind. This is really where the intensity of design discourse happens. One is dealing with a very complex conversation. The sense of doing the best by the public realm is set against a balancing of the world of the workplace. Architecture is a part of a broader cultural discourse. It is a framework for social engagement. So that's the common ground of all the projects. We are arbitrators.
Architecture is unavoidable. You can read a critic and not go to see the show, but you can't not see the building if you have to walk past it every day.
That puts an obligation on architects to make that imposition something that's worthwhile and something that's more interesting. Everyone has to use buildings in some shape or form, and probably everyone will have buildings that irritate them and buildings that give them a certain amount of pleasure, and they may not always be the same.
Architecture has that broad scale, I think, of engagement. And it then is very important that the character of building manifest in the way it's constructed and the materials of which it's constructed begins the engagement.
Parry feels a kind of responsibility towards the city, which is the kind of responsibility that you could argue banks and financial institutions ought to feel, but possibly don't. And I think it's that disjunction which makes it very interesting, that there is a kind of care about the public realm.
The important thing is to make the spaces. If the spaces are right, you will have a place and it will animate itself.
It is the calibration of adjacent spaces from the aesthetic, the material, the scaling, that is so important. And in each of the projects, this sort of sense of neighborliness, of rubbing up against many elements and the control of the kind of ambience of the environment in order to reflect that framework for people to come together is key. There's no reason that those can't add a kind of absolute delight to the everyday world of the street. It's understanding how you can weave with a new set of spaces and presences into an existing whole to create something better than was there.
There is a sense of negotiation between the inside and the out, between the private and the public. But there's also, I think, more than that, a sense of generosity. That to create a facade which is decorated, and actually it's not a very fashionable word, but Parry does decorate facades, is to give something to the public realm. Is to give something for people to look at. And that's not to be sniffed at. It's an important part of what an architect does.
The building's skin is incredibly important in terms of engagement. I think that there's another kind of job which I'm engaged in, which is thinking about horizon, but the horizon born of the ground, of the everyday, of the pavement, of the body of a building and the top of the building. There's a certain rising that will happen. I hope that the world of the fifth elevation of the roof becomes totally transformed over time into something that's much more publicly accessible and is greener, and it evolves a much more sustainable sense of itself. The sense of doing the best by the kind of public realm and the possibility that change brings to improve the public realm, set against a balancing of the appropriate massing and scale of these developments, is key.
I think this is a unique moment in the city's history, and it's potentially a game-changing moment. The city has had a real power and privilege for a very long time now, and it's become institutionalized. I think the challenge will be to make the kind of city that can adapt, becoming a place not necessarily entirely dominated by financial trade, but still a vibrant part of it. The trick is going to be to make it into a real piece of city.
Architecture has helped to rebrand the city to being not simply a business district, a workplace, but more of a place in which to work. This has been part of a process of the rediscovery of architecture as a positive force in people's lives.
Parry is one of the very few architects who's thinking about city fabric in more permanent terms. What is the culture of the city? What is the aesthetic culture, the material culture? What is the context socially? What is the context from an urban point of view? How can these buildings add something to the public realm, and how can they continue to adapt?
I hope that the city continues its renewal. The quality of the buildings that make that up can improve and will improve. And new voices can be placed into that in a modest way.
What's really important are the imaginative potentials that buildings create for people who work within them, people who see them, people who walk past them, people who own them, people who use them in all sorts of different ways. Architecture is about elevating.
It's the social movements, the interactions, the social potential that is most important, and that's what must be focused on primarily. To be successful, A city has to be attractive to those who can work anywhere. They are attracted to London as to no other city, not because London has the best jobs or the best public transport or the cheapest housing, but because London has the best party. Being the best party on the planet, therefore, is our number one priority. Youngsters have a choice. London wins as long as it's a good party.